Hello and welcome to today's Office Hours presentation. My name is Paul Hoyt, and it's my privilege to be with you today. The Office Hours program is a relaxed, informal mentoring program that we do every Monday at noon Pacific time. And the recording is going to be available online for the next few days for most folks. And then all of the recordings will be archived in our members area. And this is Office Hours number 32, so we got quite a collection of valuable advice and information in the Office Hours Library, or the Paul Hoyt Library as we are calling it. The reasons I do this is because that I know that being a successful business owner can be a great experience, but I also know firsthand that it's very tough. From my own personal experience and from the mentoring that I do with other people, I know that there are issues and challenges along the way. And I really want you to get to know me, because when you know me, you'll know that I've been around the block a few times, that I've got a lot of valuable things to share, and you'll also know that I really care about you and I want you to succeed. Our agenda for the Office Hours presentations is that we do an in-depth discussion of a business success principle. Then we offer some closing remarks and usually some special offers and an invitation for next week's session. And then we go into open questions and answers. So save your questions or write them down or type them into the question box that's on the side of your control panel there. And Audra will filter those and relay them to me at the end of the call. Today's presentation is on It's Your Money, Tips for Credit and Collections. I always try to relate these Office Hours presentations back to the key performance areas of business, which I defined in my book, The Foundation Factor, that I wrote in 2004. And this one is square in the area of financial management. In fact, managing your credit effectively is the second business success principle in the area of financial management. The first business success principle is cash flow management. The second one is credit management. And it is critical to your business that you understand the importance of managing credit and have great policies and enforce those policies throughout your business. In today's agenda, we're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to talk about why we have credit in the first place, what is credit, best practices in managing credit, implementing credit management systems, having credit policies, checking companies' credits, managing the bad debt that you have, and accelerating your cash flow, and then we're going to sum it all up with a bottom line slide. So first, let's get started about why we have credit in the first place. And I think the bottom line is that convenience closes more deals. Some time ago, somebody allowed somebody to take a product or consume a service before they paid for it. They gave them terms of some kind, and they allowed them to do business in a way that facilitated the cash flow requirements of the customer. The customer said, I really can't pay you today, or I really would rather not pay you today. Can I pay you tomorrow? Or if you'll give me 100 units of your products, I'll go sell them, and then after I sell them, I will give you the money for the product. And if you have a plenty amount of products or services around, then that convenience can make really good sense. It can really accelerate your business by offering your customers the convenience of paying you later. Many customers today absolutely demand it, especially the large ones. For example, Walmart. Walmart doesn't pay for anything up front. In fact, they take almost all of their products on consignment, which means that you don't get your money until they get their money. You ship them the product, it goes onto the shelves, they sell it off of their shelves, and once it's sold off of the shelves, once they have their money squarely in hand and firmly in hand, then you get your money. So many large customers demand terms of some kind, net 30, net 45, etc. It's a very common practice with large purchases to at least not pay for the entire purchase up front, to have some sort of a installment payment or a credit policy associated with the performance of the work. And the bottom line is that we just live in a credit world today. I think when credit cards first began to come apart, well, first of all, credit terms are different than credit cards. We'll talk about what credit terms are here in a little bit, but we've long been a credit world when it comes to normal business terms, and then we really started becoming a credit world in the early 1970s when credit cards started to become more and more popular. So let's talk about what is credit. As I said before, a credit is any arrangement that allows your customers, your clients, to consume your products or services after or before that they pay for them. So any arrangement that allows them to take the product, take the service, consume it, use it in some way before they have paid for it, in essence is offering your customer credit. So these are terms of any kind, 15-day terms, 30-day terms, net 30, 2% 10, by the way, which means that the entire amount of the invoice is due in 30 days, but if you pay me within 10 days, you can take a 2% discount. So terms like that are very common with large businesses. And in my mind, even a due upon receipt of invoice is in fact extending terms. Anytime that you don't ask your customer to pay in advance for the products and services that they are going to consume, then you are offering them terms of some kind. Because if I sell you something and say that it's due on receipt, if I send you the product or service or allow the service to go on and then send you the invoice, it's still going to be 2, 3, 5 days, some number of days usually before you pay for that. So I've extended you credit for some number of days, even if the terms are due upon receipt. Another form of credit is installment payments, where we ask our customers or client to make payments based upon the progress that we make typically. And sometimes installment payments are really progress payments, and sometimes they're just a way of paying for something over time. So you consume a $1,000 program and you pay for it in 3 payments of $350 or $330. That's another form of extending credit. So credit is very, very common. Almost every company that I know of has some credit policy, either spoken or unspoken, and the ways in which they deliver their products and services to their clients in advance of getting paid for that. The best practices of this, of managing credit, is to make credit management an integral part of your business, to make sure that people know exactly what your credit policy is, developing a credit policy, checking your accounts receivable frequently to make sure that you know who is starting to pay slowly, checking credit before you set somebody's credit terms and credit limits. We'll talk about how you do that here in a minute. And partnering with your customers to make sure that you're understanding what their cash flow capabilities are and what their cash flow restrictions are so that you can create a good plan that works for both of them and for you. Another good practice is that the CFO gets to be the heavy. At large companies, you always blame everything that has to do with credit and collections on the CFO, and I think rightfully so, because the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer of the business, is absolutely responsible for the financial performance of the business in every way, and that includes establishing and managing credit policies and enforcing those credit policies. It's been my privilege to be the CFO for several clients. In fact, I am right now for a couple of clients, and I understand that that's part of the job, is being the person that makes that tough decision and communicates that tough decision to other people upon occasion. You can always be helped with credit management systems which help you check accounts receivable automatically. One out there that I looked at was called Zencash, Z-E-N Cash, that really facilitates the checking of accounts receivable and identifying slow-paying customers. And with that system, and I think other credit management systems, it automates all of the follow-up communications. So if somebody's just a few days late, it will send out a notice on that, or 30 to 15 days late, or 30 days late. And with some of the systems, their folks will actually call on your behalf when an invoice hits a particular threshold of being late. So you can employ a credit management system at your company if it's something that's right for you to do. Another thing that you can do to manage your credit is to compute the days sales outstanding. We're going to talk about that for a minute. So the days sales outstanding is a measure of the average number of days that it takes a company to collect the revenue after a credit sale has been made. Bottom line is a low DSO number is very good. That means that you're collecting your money quickly. And a high DSO number is very bad. That means you're collecting your money slowly or not at all. The formula for days outstanding is your total accounts receivable divided by your total credit sales times the number of days in a reporting period, which is typically a month, so that is typically 30 or 31 days. Here's an example of how this works in case you want to implement this for your business today. If you want to implement it for your business today, here's an example of something that may have happened last July. So at the end of July, a company noticed they had $60,000 in accounts receivable. Their total credit sales that month, which means that any sale that they made which was not taken via credit card or taken via wire transfer or company check or cash, paid in advance of sale, all their credit sales were $100,000, and the total days were in July were 31. It means that their days sales outstanding, their DSO, was $60,000 divided by $100,000 times the 31 days, which equals 18.6 days, which means that they collected on average of the $100,000 with only $60,000 left in receivable, they collected on average in 18.6 days, which by the way isn't particularly bad. If your terms are net 7, it's not very good. If your terms are net 15, it's okay. If your terms are net 30, it's really great to have a DSO in the 18.6 range. So a DSO is a really nice part of your overall credit policy. Your credit policy is that document that you have at your company about who is going to assign terms and limits, about the guidelines for assigning credit terms and credit limits, what standard credit limits are, what standard credit terms are, and what your policy is with regards to checking credit references, and what your policy is for the credit approval process. And a best practice when it comes to credit policies is to communicate it for everyone. First, you want to have a credit policy, and then once you develop a credit policy, you want to communicate it to everyone at your company who has a need to know, which means, by the way, your sales staff and typically your marketing staff too, or people that interact with your customer, so that they know that if somebody's been put on credit hold and we're discontinuing services, they know what your policy is when it comes to assigning and allowing credit. It's always a good practice before you extend somebody credit, before you set their credit limits and define their credit terms, to check their credit. There's a good way of doing that with a Paydex score, which we'll talk a little bit more in a minute, but you can also check companies' credits via checking their credit references, and also you can check their credit from an experiential, from a practical point of view, by giving them probationary credit, which means extending them a little bit of credit, and if they turn out to pay on time and pay as expected, then you can grant them more credit. And that's a way of checking credit from an experiential point of view, of determining whether or not somebody is really a credit-worthy partner by extending them credit and seeing whether or not they're going to pay on time. And by the way, that's what banks do all the time. And people who issue credit cards is we issue probationary credit, and based upon whether or not you're actually paying in accordance to the agreement that you have, they may increase your credit card limit or increase your line of credit at a bank based upon your ability to repay that debt. The Paydex score is the only formal mechanism that I know whereby you can go to a third party and check somebody's credit. This is a Dun & Bradstreet service that you have to sign up for, and you can pay either $59, $119, or $159 for a credit report on somebody. And this credit report is gathered from their reporting customers. So Dun & Bradstreet is one of the most powerful, and I think maybe the largest and most popular credit management system for businesses that there are. There are 3 different credit bureaus when it comes to personal credit, but Dun & Bradstreet is the #1 king of the hill when it comes to managing business credit. The Paydex score is similar to a FICO score, but the ranges are from 1 to 100. And 80 generally means that you are paying your bills as expected, and that's on terms. Larger than that means you're paying your bills in advance, and less than that means you're paying your bills just a little bit slowly. And most companies look for a Paydex score of 75 or higher. So 75 means, by the way, that you are paying maybe 1 or 2 days later than expected, which is normally okay. So a Paydex score of 75 or greater is very healthy. You generally have to be a Dun & Bradstreet customer in order to get another company score. And like we said up above here on this slide, you need to pay some money to get an individual credit score on another company. But most small companies don't have one. So Paydex scores are normally used by companies that I'm guessing have $1 million in revenue or or above, that they sell products and services to new customers all the time, and they may want to check the scores before that they ship a $1,000 piece of equipment or merchandise, or a $5,000 or a $10,000 piece of merchandise to somebody. They want to make sure they understand whether that's a credit-worthy customer or not before they extend any credit whatsoever. So if your clients turn out to be non-credit worthy, and you have the unfortunate position of managing your bad debt, there are two different ways of managing that. One of it is knowing when to write it off, and another one is going after the money. We're going to talk about going after the money in quite a lot of ways, but sometimes the right thing to do is to write it off, just to save yourself time and dollars. It just doesn't make sense to spend dollars chasing pennies. Your time is worth something. Your clerical staff, your accounting staff times, your collection staff time is worth something. $10 an hour, $50 an hour, $100 an hour. So if your time is worth $50 an hour, it doesn't make a lot of sense to spend hours going after a $25 debt. To make somebody write and say, and to communicate with them in some way to say that, hey, you owe me some money and I know about it, is fine. But to go after that and pursue it sometimes just doesn't make any business sense. The bottom line is, not everybody pays their bills on time. And not everybody has the potential to pay their bills. That maybe they've had a misfortune in their business, some sort of sickness or illness, or a manufacturer that didn't deliver, or a customer that didn't pay them on time. Stuff happens in business all the time, and all of you on the call, I'm sure, are business owners, so you know that stuff happens. And sometimes you just need to save times and make a good business judgment by writing something off. It also makes your credit management a little easier. If somebody owes you something and has for years, they're not likely to pay you. And if they're not likely to pay you, once that debt goes into the extremely unlikely to ever get this money category, I urge you to write it off so you don't spend any more time looking at it, and so that it gives you more accurate accrual accounting. So oftentimes, if you apply for a loan at a bank, or if you're out raising capital for some reason, or communicating your financial position to another person or company for any reason, they may ask you for a balance sheet. And one of the key items on that balance sheet is accounts receivable. If that accounts receivable contains a lot of debt that you never hope to collect, you are in essence sending a false message to your business partner, to your bank, to your investor, prospect, to whoever you're sending that balance sheet to. So make it as accurate as possible. And my encouragement is that once something gets past 90 days or 120 days in arrear, the likelihood of you collecting on it is going way, way down. So you may want to take some other action other than just persisting and trying to collect it on yourself. So maybe the right thing for you to do is to write it off. Writing off, and I have found too, that writing things off builds goodwill. Every once in a while, I have a client that has had, a really bad circumstance in their life or in their business, and sometimes the right thing to do is to stop pestering them and stop hounding them, and just say, hey, I'm just going to let this one go, and I hope that you appreciate it, and when it comes up again, let's try to do business again when you've got some money, and especially if I want to work with them again. And the last reason is for your own peace of mind. When you're sitting and looking at a bunch of accounts receivable, and you're looking at, a half a dozen people that have not paid you money that they owe you, and they owe you lots of money, and it's been there for a long, long time, it can really serve to make you feel bad about yourself and to go into that place of scarcity thinking. So to write that off and say, it is forgiven, I'm going to let go of that, I'm going to forgive myself, I'm going to forgive my customers and clients, and I move on to a more abundant attitude towards life, can be a very, very good thing. So I encourage companies to write off bad debt when it gets beyond 90 to 120 days, especially if it's a small amount of debt. If you decide to go after the money, there are a couple of things that you can do there. You can cut off the service. You can make collection calls, you can use collection agencies, or you can file a lawsuit. So let's take a look at all four of those individually. First of all, you can cut off the service. That's oftentimes required to get attention. My personal experience is that once you cut off the service, once you decline to deliver the final portion of that engagement because the customer has not paid accordance to their terms on the contract, that people can come up with amazing ways to come up with the money. They typically oil the squeaking wheel, and if you're not squeaking, if you're not cutting off the service or products, and if you're not really communicating to them in a very tangible way that it's important for them to pay you, they will keep stringing you along. So that's been my experience, that if you really want to get paid, one of the easiest ways to get paid is to stop providing the service that you're providing or stop providing the products that you're providing. And then people will either, go away, which is a great sign that they were never going to pay you anyway, or they'll come up with the money. If just cutting off the service doesn't work, then you may also want to do collection calls. My encouragement to you is to get training or mentoring when it comes to doing those collection calls or those collection emails. There are scripts out there that you can use over the telephone and scripts that you can use in your emails that can be very, very effective. And I encourage you to get that training if you, in fact, are in the unfortunate position of making those collection calls or collection follow-up emails or letters yourself. A big key here is that you have to use your own company's name. You can't pretend to be another company, because if you do, you will come under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, which came out in 1996. So if you pretend to be anybody other than who you are, then you fall under that act, which has a lot of provisions to it, such as if a customer asks you to quit sending them emails or quit phoning them, you have to do so. By the way, that's not true. If you're calling and collecting on your own debt in your own name, you can persist to whatever level you choose to persist. Even if somebody says, don't call me anymore, you have the choice as to whether or not you want to persist with those calls or whether you want to honor their request. But if you use another company's name, if you say, for example, I'm John with the Peter Blankenship Collection Agency, all of a sudden I have fallen under the auspices of this act that was done in 1996. So if you do the collection calls, make sure that you do training or mentoring and you understand what your legal rights are and what your legal restrictions are as well. If you decide not to do that, or if after a while it was not effective to you and you decide to go with the collection agency, be aware that they will take anywhere from 20 to 95% of the amount that they collected, that they have collected on your behalf. So bottom line is you can get from either 5% to 80%. Common is that you would get 50%, that you would turn it over to a collection agency. They would take 50% of the monies that they collect, and you would take the other 50%. So there's a chance that you wouldn't get anything at all. The way that you would only get 5% in essence is when you sell your bad debt. So you've got $100,000 worth of bad debt, and a collection agency may buy that from you for $5,000 cash up front. So you get your $5,000, they get the $100,000 worth of debt, and they get to keep everything that they collect. And of course, they're betting that they're going to collect far more than $5,000 of that $100,000 when they go to buy your debt. And typically, collection agencies are associated with attorneys, so they will send out letters under the attorney's letterhead to get people's notice, and eventually they may, if they decide that it is collectible, they may file a lawsuit and proceed in court in order to go after that money, either on your behalf or on their behalf, if they have in fact bought that bad debt from you. Which brings us to our last way of going after the money, and that's lawsuits. And there are a couple of options here. Number one is the small claims option. If the debt's under $5,000, or if you choose to reduce the debt and only try to collect $5,000, you can do that in small claims court, which you can do without an attorney, which means that there's very low cost associated with filing a claim in small claims court and pursuing that. And you can see how small claims court works all day long by watching Judge Judy or Judge Alex or Judge Brown or Judge whoever that's on TV shows. You can record one and take a look at it if you're working during the day, and you can see exactly how small claims courts work. The people show up with your evidence, show up with all your documentation, show up with your written agreements, show up without your attorney and pursue that lawsuit, pursue that claim in front of a judge. If it's over $5,000, you can file a civil lawsuit. My caution to you with regards to that is that winning a judgment doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the money. If somebody owes you $100,000 and you go sue for $100,000, and you may have, you may have legal fees associated with that, or your attorney may, by the way, in case of a lawsuit, may do it on consignment, where they get 33% of the winnings and you get 67% of the winnings. But sometimes they will also demand some sort of a fee up front as opposed to having it all on consignment. Just winning a judgment doesn't mean that you're going to get the money, because you can't squeeze blood out of a turnip. And if somebody doesn't have the money and you have a judgment against them, they may take their alternative of filing bankruptcy. And if they file bankruptcy or they just refuse to pay in some way, you may not win a judgment. You may win the judgment but not get the money. So generally speaking, you only want to pursue the legal options against people that you know who have the ability to pay. They're an ongoing business or enterprise, and for whatever reason they're just not paying your debt. Then it may make sense to you to pursue that either in small claims court or in a general civil lawsuit. Let's move on to a happier subject here, and that's on accelerating cash flow. Because when it comes to credit policies and credit management, there are things that you can do right now today to accelerate your cash flow through better credit management. First of all, you can increase the frequency of your billing. Some people just bill on a monthly basis. Other people bill on a daily basis or a weekly basis. Whenever you bill, that can accelerate your payments, because many people will pay from 15 days from receipt of invoice or 30 days from receipt of invoice, as opposed to paying according to your terms, which are 30 days or 15 days from the time the product or the service was delivered. So one of the things that you can do right now to accelerate your cash flow is to increase your frequency of billing. Another thing that you can do, and one of my very favorite things to do, is to make pre-collection calls, which means that if somebody owes you a lot of money and they're supposed to pay you in a couple of weeks, to pick up the phone and give them a call ahead of time and say, hey, this payment of $5,000 is going to be due in 10 days. I just want to know in advance if there's any challenges that you have in making that payment, because we're depending upon it. I want to make sure that you have that invoice in your system and it's scheduled for payment, because sometimes invoices get lost and sometimes terms inside an automated payment system are put in there incorrectly. So what you really want to do is get a hold of their accounts payable department, make sure that that invoice is on the books and it's scheduled for payment in their next payment cycle, and that's called a pre-collection call. And that can really accelerate the revenue to you, because it will avoid them being able to say, wow, I didn't get your invoice, or, sorry, I put it in and we've scheduled it for payment next week, etc. So you want to make that pre-collection call if getting the money is extremely important for you. Another thing that you can do is require down payments, 50% down, and make sure that you've covered all of your costs, with the down payment. So at least you're not out the cash. You may be out your profit, but you're not out what you had to put out to deliver the product or services. So I'm a big fan of down payments on many of the engagements that I use, and for most people too. So at least 50% down for most things to make sure that you have covered your costs. And you may also choose to offer other payment schedules to accelerate the cash flow too. So it may be 25% down, 25% in 1 week, 25% whenever I deliver X, etc. Can accelerate your cash flow so that the entire amount isn't due as a balloon payment after you've delivered the entire product or service. And another thing you can do is to minimize the holdbacks. So a holdback, by definition, is an amount of money that your customer or client doesn't have to pay until they are 100% satisfied with the product or service. You can, with the agreements that you've got, minimize those holdbacks because that will accelerate your cash flow just because you've changed the agreement. So there are some industries like the construction industry and other industries where holdbacks are common, and it's just a matter, of course, of doing business in that industry. But if you can avoid those, then I encourage you to avoid those. So here's the bottom line. Remember to do a great job. The number one rule, by the way, of having great credit management is to not have any credit issues. And sometimes Sometimes the reason why a client hasn't paid you is because they have a valid issue or a complaint about your product and services. So number one rule is to do a great job for them. So that eliminates that as a possibility of why they're not paying you on time. And I always encourage you to have great relationships with your clients. I try to have great relationships with my clients because people will pay their friends before they will pay the people that they are disgruntled with. So have a great relationship with your customers or clients, deliver an extremely high quality product or service, and you will automatically improve your credit management because you will reduce the number of times that people decline to pay you for whatever reason. Then I always encourage you to install and follow your credit policies and communicate your credit terms and limits from the very beginning on the agreements that you have with your customers or clients or in your conversations with them. Let them know that this is the way that we do it here at my company. You are, it's 50% down, 50% on delivery, or whatever it happens to be. In some cases, it's 100% down before we'll begin to do the product or the service. My encouragement to you also is to nip the problems early in the bud. When you find somebody is starting to pay slowly, then immediately begin that conversation with them to say, hey, I expected your payment last week. I didn't get it, and I was counting on that. When can I expect to have that payment? You have to have the courage to make that call so that people will not abuse you. So that was the agenda for today. We covered all of this stuff, and I know there's a lot of stuff in there about why we do credit and what is credit and best practices in managing credit and checking credit and managing your bad debt and accelerating your cash flow and tying it up with the bottom line. So here's your homework and your exercise. Review your accounts receivable. Right now, today, or after you listen to this recording, review your accounts receivable and understand who owes you money and decide what portions of that is collectible and what's not collectible. And if you think that it's not collectible, then my encouragement to you is to just write it off and forget it and go away. And if you decide that it is collectible in some form or fashion, then pursue it either with your own collection calls or collection agencies or filing a lawsuit. Create that simple credit policy and communicate it throughout your company and enforce it from top to bottom. If you have any problems with any of that, if you need help, then get yourself a mentor or a coach or a CFO who will help you design your credit policies and who will help you enforce your credit policies and, yes, sometimes even make those credit and collection calls with you. So we're going to have open questions and answers here in just a minute. I invite you to have comments or questions on the topic of the day and then any other issues that you have. And as always, I'd like for you to tell me what your biggest takeaways are and the insights that you gained from the presentation. And tell me what you're going to do. Tell me what you're going to focus on in order to move your business forward. And post that in the Brilliant Business Group if you are a member of that. When it comes to products and services, my approach is to always to meet you where you are and help you make amazing progress in the next 90 days or so, and also to provide the quality education training that you need to avoid the huge mistakes that can slow you down and shut you down. I offer a variety of different services, from consulting coaching services to my library program to my Beyond Business Survival CEO training program, and I'll talk about each one of those in just a second. First of all, I'm immediately available for services that you could use right now to move your business forward. Business plans, financial models, one-on-one empowerment coaching, or mentoring in some way, and those programs can start as little as a couple of $100s. The Paul Hoyt Library contains now 32 office hours recordings and dozens of other business processes, agreements, spreadsheets, templates that you can use to move your business forward, along with some bonus inspirational messages, and I'm adding to it every single week. The Paul Hoyt Library has 3 different pricing options: a lifetime option of $279, a $79 per year option, or if you want to just sign up on a monthly basis, it's $9.38. And starting today, I'm implementing a brand new policy, and that's any client that has, over the history of my business, spent more than $1,000 with me, you automatically get a lifetime membership, and that includes some of you on the call today. So congratulations. In addition to the products and services that you got when we first engaged, you also get a lifetime membership in the Paul Hoyt Library, with my deep, deep appreciation for the opportunity to be of service and the business that we have transacted before today. My Beyond Business Survival training program is that critical small business owner training that it's what you need to know when you're the CEO So because I know that if you don't get that training, you'll do what I did, which means that you'll make a $10,000 mistake, a $20,000 mistake, a $50,000 mistake that will slow you down or shut you down. And I don't want you to do that. So I want you to learn from my mistakes, and I want you to learn from the mistakes of others so that you don't make those mistakes. I mean, there's not many businesses out there that can afford to make $5,000 mistake time after time after time. You make too many of those and you're out of business. So the Beyond Business Survival Program is a do-it-yourself strategic planning business growth program where you download the workbooks and the transcripts. You go through the program and discover ways that you can dramatically increase your results by growing your revenues, increasing your profits, or reducing your risk. Prioritize all those insights and then take action based upon them. So this is really a do-it-yourself strategic planning, fix the problem program that I encourage you to take advantage of. It's only $997. It's worth, I think, a lot more than that. I think we try to price it like it was a 5-hour course in a very expensive college because that's what the program really is. And as I mentioned earlier, that when you purchase this, that includes a lifetime membership in the Paul Hoyt Library. And for a limited time, if you want to try it out, send me an email, and we'll send you the access to the first 2 modules for free, the Introduction and the Leadership module, because I know that when you go through those, you will realize how valuable they are and you want to buy the rest. So I want you to also join me. Connect with me on Facebook, become a personal friend, like the Paul Hoyt business page, or join the Brilliant Business Group, and also connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also get your energy of the day. Every day for the last 160 days or so, I've published the energy of the day, and pretty soon we're going to make that a blog entry so that you can have an email subscription to that as well. But I encourage you to do that so we can keep engaged with each other. The next office hours is on May the 12th. I haven't decided what the topic is. We got a lot of good feedback on last week's session, which was on gamification based on the book Hooked. And we may do a bit of a workshop around that, but I'm not particularly sure. I want you to be a member of the library in order to participate in the office hours calls from here on out. We're going to put some of them for free, but the live attendance in the calls and listening on the recording, this is the last free one. The exception is that when you sign up for the Paul Hoyt Library, you get it by 30 days free because we're not going to bill your credit card for 30 days. So you can get a couple more for free once you sign up. But from here on out, it's only members of the Paul Hoyt Library, and of course those who have spent some money with me in the past or granted that free lifetime membership, who will be able to listen to and participate in the office hours presentation. And for those of you who choose to participate going forward, let me know what topics you would like for me to address. And by the way, this topic, the topic of credit management and credit policies, was one of the most frequent ones suggested, and that's why we did it this week. I encourage you to do your homework, and then let's break into the questions and answers. So first, comments and questions on today's topic, and then any other issues that you have, go to paulssurvey.com and provide suggestions for future office hours presentations, and reach out and talk to me personally if you like. My email and telephone number are there on your screen. And of course, if you'd like to schedule a free 15-minute check-in session of some kind, you can always go to Schedule Paul and pick a time that works for your calendar. And with that, I'm going to take a breath. That was a fairly long presentation today, and invite Audra to ask me a question that you may have come up with. Audra.
Hey, Paul. So Carol actually has some wonderful feedback. She's thanking you for this presentation. It helped her discover her relationship with money and the exchange of services she had opted with her business to do half now and half before. But what it really did is helped her even holding the space that she has value and something of value worth being paid for.
I thank you for that comment. That's very meaningful to me. Anytime that I can help somebody shift their energy into a way that helps them feel more powerful or more peaceful or more joyful in any way, that is deeply inspiring to me. So thank you for that, Carol. And you are, and everybody on this call and everybody listening to the recording, you're worth something. I mean, treat yourself with the respect that you would treat other people. And that means sometimes drawing the line and saying that, these are my credit policies, and this was the credit limit, and these were the terms that we agreed upon, and now it's time for you to step in to your integrity and honor the agreement that we had with each other. So thank you very much for sharing that. Next, Audra.
So as often when we're self-employed, we do business with friends, or we have a good friend that owes us money. Do you have any advice on what we should do in that situation?
I do. The number one thing that you really must do for yourself and for your friendship is to have a tough conversation with them. And as many of you know, I teach the UCR method, which stands for I'm uncomfortable, I'm concerned, and this is my request, as a mechanism for you to have those uncomfortable conversations. So an uncomfortable conversation like this might be something like, Jim, I got to tell you, I'm really uncomfortable about the way that you have not paid this money back to me in the way that you agreed to do so. And I'm very concerned that this is going to damage our relationship long term. And frankly, I'm concerned that you're never going to pay me. So what I'd really like for you to do is either pay the whole thing today or at least pay me half today. Can you do that? I mean, I know that that can be a very difficult conversation, and that's why I teach people the UCR method. But you owe it to yourself to have that conversation. Because if you're not having that conversation, it's because you're giving into your own fear. So step out in courage and step out and take a little risk and stretch yourself a little bit and have that uncomfortable conversation with somebody and draw the line. And then based upon their response, you can decide what to do from there on out. You can decide to either respond or you can say, well, geez, I've got to think about that. All right, let me process that and get back to you. Or let me think about that and get back to you. If they decline to honor your request in any way, then you can take the next step, whatever that may be for you. Next question, Audra.
So we have sort of a peripherally related question.
Okay.
Muted.
My friend needs to borrow money. I feel pressure helping them out. How do you suggest that I decline gracefully without jeopardizing my friendship?
Unmuted.
There are a couple of different ways to do that. First of all, use the UCR system. Say, I'm really uncomfortable making loans to friends, and here's the reason why. I'm very concerned that if you don't repay the debt, that it could really damage our relationship. And I've heard of dozen times of where that has really gotten in the way of a relationship in the past. Or it's been my personal experience that I have loaned money to people before, and when they were not able to pay me in the way that they expected to be able to pay me or according to our agreement, that it really damaged our relationship long term, and I don't want that to happen again. So, that is a polite way to turn them down, is to bring it back to me, put it back on you. I'm not willing to take that risk because of the way that it has not turned out for me in the past, or the way that it might make me feel, or I would consider our long-term relationship to be at risk. Every time we show up at a party or a conference or a family gathering together, I don't want to have that thought that my best friend, my sister, my brother, my aunt, my uncle owes me money in some way, and let that get in between our relationships. Some people take a much different tack. They just say, hey, I'm not a bank. I don't do that stuff. My wife and I agreed, my husband and I agreed, my advisor and I agreed, or I just agreed with myself, that I'm sorry, I don't lend money to family and friends. And just leave it at that. You don't have to, by the way. That's your choice to make. You can install a personal family policy right now that says that we don't lend money to family and friends, and agree upon that with your spouse, significant other, or that person who's looking back at you from the mirror, and just agree that you can do that. There's no obligation that you have to loan money to people. And by the way, some people do something much different than that. When somebody comes and says, I really need a loan of $1,000, I've seen some people really take the high road and say, you know what? I'm not going to do that because I don't believe in loans, but I'm going to give you $200. I'm going to give you $1,000. And it's just going to be a gift from me to you. If you choose to pay that back in some time, that's great. If you choose to give me a gift that's of equal value at some point in time in the future, that's great. If you choose to pay it forward in some way, that's great. But between you and me, it's just a gift. So God bless and best wishes. That can be a very effective way of handling it too. Next question, Audra.
I'm a coach. What kind of credit policy should I establish?
That's an interesting one. Most of the coaches that I work with have a credit policy that looks something like this, is that we give away a half an hour or an hour worth of coaching session for free, and typically, that is a sales opportunity as well. So we frame the call that says that here's the way the call is going to work, is that I want to help you through a particular problem or issue. I want to give you some advice, and then at the end of the call, we're going to have a conversation about whether or not we want to work together going forward. So that initial free strategy session coaching call is in fact a sales opportunity. It's an opportunity for the coach to demonstrate the value that they can bring, and an opportunity to ask for the business. So asking for the business, usually with coaches, my recommendation is that you get the money up front and that you offer people one or more options. We have 3 packages available. The first package is 4 coaching sessions for $1,000. The second package is 10 coaching sessions for $2,000, and the third package is 15 coaching sessions for $2,750. Where there's a volume purchase discount associated with people who want to sign up for the larger packages. And you offer, say, which one of those would you like? But paying for all the coaching services in advance, at least for that first engagement, is very important. And by the way, that's something that I do and that I can recommend that other people do. If, oftentimes the first engagement I have with a client is all money up front, because it's typically a smaller engagement. But once we have established that business relationship and I feel like the energy is good, then I start extending people terms. And those terms are, so the first $1,000 worth of coaching systems you pay, or coaching services you pay up front, and after that, we'll bill you on the end of the month, or you can pay, on a slightly different basis. So my encouragement for you is to get the money up front for the first engagement, and then thereafter you can continue to have a pay in advance policy, or you may elect to extend somebody credit to a point to where it feels comfortable for you to do so. Next question. Hopefully that was helpful.
Very. So, Paul, I actually have a peripheral comment, if I may, about credit cards and credit.
Yes.
So I just want to remind everybody that, clients can also do a chargeback. So if this is something that's really important to you and you are really short on cash flow, somebody pays you with a credit card, even up to almost a year past that date of the charge, the card company can take that money back from you.
That's a great comment, Audra. So in essence, whenever you take somebody's payment via credit card, you are, in essence, extending them the possibility of credit, or you really have some risk associated with taking a person's credit card payment. So that's, under what circumstances you do that can be a very big part of your credit management policy. Well said, Audra.
Thank you. And although I know you're not a tax professional, are you aware of any way to handle bad debt? Can I get tax credit for it?
You can only get tax credit for it if you file taxes on an accrual basis. So for example, and most small companies, by the way, do not do that. Most companies file taxes on a cash basis. So you never would have paid income tax, on the money that you didn't receive. But if you're filing taxes on an accrual basis, then you can, then you might have to write off the bad debt, and you might have some tax benefit when it comes to writing off the bad debt. But whenever you write off a bad debt, by the way, you are obligated to send your client or customer a 1099 so that they have forgiveness of debt income. So they're not just out free whenever they don't pay you. If you decide to forgive the debt, if you decide to write off the debt, especially if it's a large debt, you have the opportunity, and I think really the obligation, to give them a 1099, so they still have to pay income tax on the amount of debt that you have forgiven. So work with your tax attorney whenever you decide to write off debt. You can work with your tax professional, rather, not tax attorney, but work with your tax professional to determine under what circumstances you need to send them a 1099, and they are obligated to pay taxes on the amount of forgiveness of debt income that they received from you. Next question.
Since we're on forgiveness of debt, when do I just let it go and write it off? What do you suggest I do?
Well, I think it's really up to you, and very large companies have a tendency not to, very large companies, when something hits the 120-day and, they had already cut off the products and services and the person's just not going to pay, they decide whether or not to invest any more of their own time or whether to turn this over to a collection agency to go after, the rest of the money. Personally, what I do, and this is every January the 1st, I call it Amnesty Day. So every January 1st, I take a look at my accounts receivable, and I take a look at people who have owed me money from the last year, and I decide which amount of that money I'm going to leave on the books and which amount of that money I'm just going to write off. And sometimes I just decide to write it off, and I'm going to start the new year fresh and clean and free, and I'm not going to go after that money anymore, and I'm going to forgive them and forgive myself if I think that it's necessary to do so. And I'm going to pursue the next year with an accounts receivable that is much cleaner and much lower, and I just go after it in the next year. So that's my policy. And as I mentioned earlier in the call as well, sometimes I just think it's a matter of goodwill. Sometimes I think it's the right thing to do. And I remember several people that I've done this with that, for whatever reason, their circumstances were just upside down. They had a illness or injury, or in some other way that their life had, gone down, took some really bad turns in some very unexpected ways, and it just didn't make any sense for me to kick somebody when they were down or try to demand something from them when I just knew in my heart and soul that they didn't have it. And it just doesn't seem to be the right thing to do. So in those cases, I also forgave it and just wrote it off, and we began our relationships anew on the other side of that. So you got to search your own heart, but also search your practicality and really pay attention to the energy of abundance. And if you keep surrounding yourself with this sense of, people do me wrong and people aren't paying me, and, the money's hard to get, and gosh, I've got to make this collection call again, that can really get in your way of pursuing new business that you do have great relationship with. So, you lose your time, you lose your energy going after it. And if you're also the salesperson and you're also the person responsible for business development, that can really get in your way. So I encourage you to write it off or hand it off to somebody else so that you don't have that energy impacting your day-to-day performance. Next question, Audra.
Paul, if you don't mind too, I also have something regarding the small claims court that you had mentioned.
Yes.
So I discovered that the amounts are different per county. So for example, where Chicago is, they have a much higher limit for small claims court. And I also learned that in some cases I'm really SOL because I have to file in my customer's county, which means if they live on the other side of the country, I need to file in their local county if I want to go to small claims court.
That and I found that to be true here in Santa Clara County, California. If you have an agreement with somebody, if you have a signed agreement, you can file in your home county. If you don't have a signed agreement, you have to file in their county, which is a great reason for having signed agreements in the first place, because it gives you some sort of jurisdiction and legal precedence in case you ever have to go after the money. But you're absolutely right. Check with your county about what their policies are, because small claims court really is on a county-by-county basis, and the limits can change and the terms can change as well. So thank you for adding that and plussing me on that, Audra. And we're at the top of the hour, or close to it. Do we have any more questions?
We do. We have a follow-on question.
Okay.
About when you're writing off the debt. Do you file with credit agencies as well if you have to write it off?
You can. You have your opportunity to send a message to Dun & Bradstreet if you want, which is about the only credit agency. I'm assuming it's business as opposed to personal. If it's personal credit, if you're doing business with a business, then it's Dun & Bradstreet. If you're doing business with an individual, then, and it could be their personal credit, then it's your option as to whether or not you file with the 3 credit reporting agencies and report that bad debt. Some companies have a policy of doing that. You know, it's part of their credit policy that they have developed that says that if we write off any debt, you know, over $100 or over $200, it's our policy to file that as, you know, with the credit reporting agencies. And they can use that as leverage when it comes to collecting the money. So if you receive an email or a letter that says, you know, please pay me the money that you owe me, that's one thing. If you have one that says, please pay me the money that you owe me, or we will file a small claims lawsuit here in our home county, that's another thing. And if you say that we're going to file the small claims court, or we will report this to the 3 credit reporting agencies, that's quite another thing. So that can be a valuable part of your credit management policy and your collections policy. It becomes another, you know, another arrow in the quiver, another tool in your toolbox to use to accelerate the ways in which people pay you. Anything else, Audra? Or have we come to the end?
Okay, we have a sort of an off-topic question.
Good.
So isn't it usually recommended to go to friends, family, and fools first to raise capital? How do you make your offer more effective when going this route?
Well, I teach the 6 stages of raising capital, and we did an office hours presentation on that a few weeks ago, and I encourage you to join the library and tune in and listen to that. But the bottom line is that's step 2 is friends and family, and yes, sometimes we call it the 3 F's, friends, family, and fools. Stage 1 is the founders. You know, say that's your own capital or your partner's capital that they bring in to start and grow your business, and that's founder's capital. That's stage 1. And stage 2 is friends and family. And I don't add the F to that, but friends and family. And then the next stage out are people who fall into the, I would say, professional acquaintances category, people I call friendly angels. So yeah, you definitely, those are the first 3 stages, the founder's money, the friends and family money, and the friendly angels money. Thank you for that unrelated question. Any more of those before we call it a day?
No, I think we've got them all taken care of.
Again, thank you, Audra, for helping me out on today's call, and thanks to all of you who joined in to attend live or to are listening to this recording. I invite you to join the Paul Hoyt Library and take a look at paulhoyt.com and learn more about the fine products and services that we deliver. And until I talk to you again, this is Paul Hoyt wishing you a most marvelous and prosperous day. Thank you so much.